Talk shoes.
Recorded live.
Hello. We're going to be having a special guest. Hopefully it works out. And so, yeah.
Hello.
Hey, is this David Parker?
You got me.
Hey, David, it's Mike. And folks, it's Old Religion. The recording already started, so.
Oh, cool.
All right. Once again, folks, this is Old Religion Dystopia, Knowing versus Belief. My name is Michael Adams. I'm from Ohio. I live on the border of Ohio and Michigan, and I'm simply a man investigating and discovering and learning the truth. So, and interesting story about this recording, and it will be put up on hopefully no problems. Not only talkshoe.com and other platforms, but also YouTube. So, and but I was finally got around to looking at some message requests and that, and I was looking at this, and I'm like, how did I miss this? And this is posted on Facebook by David Parker, May 24th. Says, I have a family of Bigfoot living in the woods around my home, and we do get a lot of activity. Hey, if you could do something about your end of things, Dave, there's a lot of crackling going on. I don't know if you're moving around or whatever.
I got the phone on speaker, if that's okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. But you're probably going to have to not have it on speaker because it's causing a lot of interference, a lot of crackling. So,
is that better?
Oh, it's 100 times better. Thank you.
Okay, well, then we'll do that.
All right, now let me finish reading this wonderful message you sent me. Truly intriguing message. Type of messages a guy like myself just loves to receive. He says here, I have a family of Bigfoot living in the woods around my home, and we do get a lot of activity. I have many stories, and some are just funny. Over the past 5 years, I have reached out to these creatures and had some unusual things happen. And there are a dozen or 12 of them over 7 feet tall in the family, plus some little ones. I found a stone tool and have tree structures all over the place. And then he gave me his phone number. So I said, I don't know what else to do. I'll just call him. And I called you about an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago, actually. And just said, hey, let's do a recording. It sounds like you have a very interesting life story to share with folks, a unique one. And so anyways, if it's all right with Dave, is it okay if people want to, they can reach out to you with, how can people reach out to you before we get going?
I've got a Facebook thing, and that's pretty well the best way to get a hold of me. I get on there pretty much every day because, well, right now what I'm doing for a living is I'm doing a lot of trading. So I'm always looking on the sale sites and everything else, and I'm on Facebook. So that's probably the best way to get a hold of me because, like, for example, tomorrow I got a trade where I got to go pick up a motorcycle that I'm trading for.
Oh, good.
We'll work on it, and then I'm going to hopefully I've got a guy who's going to want to trade an SUV for it. So after
good idea.
Trade, well, I'm going to trade a $300 gun for a motorcycle that the guy wants $700 for, that I want to trade to a guy who wants $1,200 for an SUV. So that'd be a good week.
There you go. That's a smart move.
You know?
You could get, if you got the capacity and the ability to do it, that's something I would recommend more people try to do that, because it's cutting out a lot of the
for stuff that you can use, and if you can't use it, maybe somebody else can, or if you've got a little bit of know-how, maybe you can fix it and get rid of it. Because just like they had a deal on the internet where they had a kayak that retails at $400. It was $50 including shipping, so I ordered one. Well, I talked to a guy. He's got a car that's got a couple of issues. He doesn't want to fix it, but he'd be interested in trading for a kayak. So if I can do that, I'll have a car for $50.
Cool.
I got one of those auto analyzers. You plug it in, you see what's wrong with it, you fix it. Well, then a car that the guy was originally asking $300 for, you can probably turn around and sell it for $1,200, or maybe I'll keep it. 115,000 miles on a Buick Park Avenue ain't the worst way to go.
No, very good. Do you have? Is there a certain platform that you use to reach out with people that you would recommend, or is it a closed one?
As far as what is the Bigfoot
trading
community, or
no trading? We're talking about just about trading.
Well, I look on Craigslist and I look on all these local town things where some of them it'll say a swap shop, and others it's this, that, and the other thing. You never know.
The traditional
some of
avenues.
it's like for an area, and people post what they've got for sale. Now, a lot of times you find all the stuff you'd find on a rummage sale.
Right.
Other time, sometimes it's vehicles, boats, motorcycles, jet skis. You never know what they got. About the only thing they really don't post on there is firearms. Not too often, but that's cool.
Okay. Well, I guess the other thing is I noticed you have. Let's get into the Bigfoot a little bit. In your Facebook page, you have a couple images, photos of Bigfoot. Look like wood carvings and that. Why did you use that?
Oh, that's Daniel Murphy's work. He's a sculptor. He's awesome. Matter of fact, he's done a sculpture, I believe, of the president. He had one of the a congressman or somebody come by and look at it and approve it. That's probably going to go to the White House. The guy's awesome artist.
Good. Very good. I see he does a lot of different images and portraits, or if you will, bust type things. So, okay, so...
Now, I don't have a lot of pictures with Bigfoot, and I'm like, people say, well, if you got all this activity, why don't you have all these pictures? Well, first off, they're jet black, they're active at night, and they hide in the shadows. So how good a picture are you going to get?
Oh, yeah. Well, we won't worry about that right now. I quit
spotlighting them because it hurts your eyes.
David, what I'd like to know before we can get into that, we'll get into that more, is why did you feel the prompting? Do you remember why you were prompted back in the 24th of May to reach out to me and even give me your phone?
I must have seen something. I must have either listened to a show of yours or something, and it sounded like you're somebody that I'd make a good guest on their show.
Good.
And I take a different approach to things than most of the people out there, and I don't know, I get better results than they do, it seems like. And I've just recently started up a new group that's pretty limited where it's exclusively for researchers that are actually out in the field, getting out in the field and finding stuff as a venue where we can share our findings without having to deal with all the trolls and all these people who think that, well, we've been doing it this way for 40 years, and if you don't do it that way, well, you're just wrong. I you know what I mean? I don't have time for those people. And the people who always want to say, well, you need to do this, and you need to do that, and you should put up trail cameras, and you should do all this and that. And it's, well, and you should get out from behind the keyboard and go try it and let me know how that works. I do things my way, and you know, it's been through a lot of trial and error. And I'll tell you what, when, like my first sighting, I lived here for about 5 years, and there'd been some weird stuff happen once in a while, and the coyote activity was off the hook sometimes at night. And you know, when you start hearing like 30 of them all going off and howling and stuff, that can be somewhat intimidating when you're outside, because that's enough of them where, hey, let's face it, they could kill you and eat you. I don't know about you, but that's got to be one of the worst ways to go, being eaten alive. But there was just unusual things. But I moved to the state of Missouri from South Dakota, so you kind of got to expect things are a little different here. I mean, the terrain's different. There's a lot more woods. I mean, when I was near the Sioux Falls, South Dakota area, if you wanted to find trees, you either go along the river, the farmers' groves, or in the city. Otherwise, it's, well, let's see, we planting soybeans this year, we planting corn.
Right.
I mean, that's about the only difference. And that's pretty boring, actually. And I don't know about you, but I hate driving along roads like that where they're just straight and endless fields.
Yep, there's a lot of it around here, that's for sure.
And when my father was still alive and I was a kid, he had a Navy buddy that lived in Missouri, and we came to visit. I don't know, I just kind of fell in love with the way nature and everything was here, the countryside. The people were friendly. There's trees and woods and hunting and fishing. Because, like, for an example, if you were to draw a circle of a 1 mile radius around my place, there's probably at least a dozen stock dams in that area, if not 20. Because, like, this area, after the Second World War, when they had the WPA going to put people back to work, they had a deal where if you wanted to build a stock dam, if you followed a few government regulations, the government would pay for half of it. So one of the things was you had to put a barbed wire fence around it and keep livestock out of it for like 5 years. And so a lot of the ranchers around here built a lot of stock dams. And so, I mean, there's a lot of great fishing around. All you got to do is talk to the farmers, and, you know, a lot of these dams haven't been fished in years. I know. See, I've got a 10-acre piece of property. It's kind of shaped similar to the state of Minnesota, and I live along the south end of the property, pretty close to the road. And now I'll run through what my first encounter was pretty much like.
Yes, please do.
This happened after I lived here 5 years. I mean, it wasn't anything extraordinary, but I've got 10 acres, and probably 8 of it is covered with trees. So I as a person who hates to waste things, you got all these dead trees, I figure, well, if I put a wood burner in, it's better than just dragging all this dead stuff into a big pile and wasting it. I just, well, save a little money heating my house. So nice. I had been out in this stand of trees, and there were a lot of trees within it that had died out because they were just too thick. And it was all oak, and it was nice firewood size. No splitting or nothing. So, hey, it doesn't get much better than that, does it? So I had gone out one day and cut, and then I went out with my truck, and I was going to load up and bring a bunch back and haul it into the basement. Well, the way my property is, the house and the barn, it's almost like a finger of land that goes out. And then it drops off pretty steep off that finger on either side. And on the west side, I have a stock dam. And on the other side, it goes down to a gully, which is pretty much along the edge of the property line. And from the barn, I don't know, it's maybe 300 feet down to the bottom, and it drops almost 100 feet in elevation. So it's a pretty steep drop-off. But anyway, I'm going out in my truck, and I'm going to make a U-turn on the top of the hill so I can pull up as close as I can and park to where I had the wood that I had cut the day before. And I'm coming along, and right by the edge of the tree line, I see a dark figure standing there. Now, it wasn't, I'm assuming it had to have been a female because it didn't have, the super wide shoulders. And now, I didn't see any facial features. It was maybe like 100 feet away, and it was just standing there, and I believe its back was to me. Because pretty much what I saw is, the best way to describe it is, when you have one of those pistol silhouette targets, if you strip out all the numbers and lines and everything, it was pretty much like that. And it looked about man-sized, and I'm like, no way, no effing way. And I looked away for a second, and it was gone. Now, it could have took one step and been gone. I'm not saying it went poof and vanished into thin air, but it could have took a step. Now, I parked the truck, and I'll tell you, I looked over my shoulder an awful lot because where I parked was, 150 feet from where I saw this. And I only grabbed about half of what I was doing and called it good enough. And then I came back up to the house. Now, 2 days later, I went back to see if I could find any tracks or anything. And this had been on April 2nd, it would have been 2012, about 2:30 in the afternoon. Now, when I went back, I had to kind of work my way around because where it had been standing was on the opposite side of where a bunch of black raspberries grow, and if you know anything about those, they got thorns all over them, so I didn't want to go
Sure.
through that. Now, when I got to the spot where it had been, I didn't see any tracks because there was a lot of heavy leaf litter on the ground. And you know how that is. Unless the tracks are fresh, it's going to be like a sponge and expand back to where it was. So I didn't find anything. I did find an interesting rock there, though, that had been like a glacial rock that had a little spot of gold on it, so I picked that up and I kept it. But now when I got there, I realized that what I thought was about 6 foot tall was actually about 8 foot tall. Due to the slope of the hill and stuff, I had misjudged the height. So, and that does fit in with the size of an adult female. So I'm assuming that's what it was. Then, about a week later...
So when you say you assumed that that's what it was, are you saying that you already had some knowledge of, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, kind of thing beforehand?
Yeah. I saw the Patterson film when I was a kid.
Yeah, sure.
I was a believer, but, it's kind of a surprise when you actually got them, and on your own property. And, when you think about it, some of the weird things that had happened kind of made a little more sense then.
So what were some of the weird things?
Oh, like I had a light on the side of my house that was up by the peak. And out in the country, they kind of did a hob job on it where it had a cord hanging down. Well, something at one night had yanked on that cord and ripped the light off the side and tore the edge of the soffit off. And, of course, my dogs went ballistic, and I went outside and I couldn't find nothing. But something did it, and like, what the heck?
Yeah. What would want to do that, right? Yeah.
Well, and I didn't know, so what do you do? And sometimes you'd have stuff missing, and sometimes it'd come back, sometimes it wouldn't. And for a while, the neighbors had a dog that used to get into my stuff, and if you take your shoes off and leave them by the door, you come back, you only got one shoe, and you think, "Ugh, stupid dog." So you go over to your neighbor's house and find your chewed up shoe in their yard. And I don't miss having those people for neighbors. I'm glad they moved. But anyway.
Now, did your neighbors ever say anything? Make any kind of suggestions, hints that they were having similar experiences? No? Okay.
No.
Right.
Now, I've only got one other family that lives on the road that I'm on, because I'm on a dead-end road. And they live closer to the highway, and they're usually in by dark. Because the husband, he works for one of those processing plants, and he's a buyer. He buys hogs for the hog processing plant. So he gets up really early, so the family's on that type of a schedule. So they usually hit the hay pretty early. Now, I told them that we got these things around, and they kind of look at you like you're nuts. I know when I told my sister, she said, "Well, are you losing your mind?" And I'm like, "No, are you?" But, you tell someone about all you get's ridiculed. Okay. Now, I did talk to the property across the road. They had gone in there and did a bunch of logging and took a lot of lumber out of there. And this guy who's the son of the owner of the property over there was out there cutting up the treetops and selling firewood. And I talked to him, and he had told me that about 30 years ago there had been a rash of sightings, but that was probably 10 miles up the road and not right here. And he'd never had any encounters or seen any of them around here. But he had heard of a bunch of them about 30 years ago. So they have been in the area. They have been reported. Across the border in Iowa, I know there was an investigation by an Iowa.
Before we carry on, I would like to ask you a question, just if you had any insights of this. Because a lot of things you're sharing, I hear over and over again, people that live, a little far out, on the end of a road, water sources, wooded areas, different terrain. And then you hear this stuff like, well, there was a rash of sightings 30 years ago. So we're talking, what, 80s, I guess.
Yeah.
70s, 80s. And I just wondered if you ever thought about that. Why is there always these rash of sightings and then there's like a lull of it? Is it because, have you heard any, well, I don't want to put anything in your mouth, but have you ever thought about why that is?
Well, maybe they were exploring new territory. Maybe a group had exhausted a food supply and had to move.
Could be.
Now, here, this group seems to be here year-round, and from what I can tell, what I would call their home or base camp or whatever you want to describe it as, seems to be about a half mile away from me. Now, when I look on the satellite Google, there is a pond in the woods that's hidden that if you didn't look at it and see it from the air, you wouldn't know it was even there. And I think that's where they go to sleep, because that's usually where they start heading about 3:30 in the morning. They head that direction. And that's generally the direction that they come from about this time of night most of the time. And okay. I know ever since I moved in here, I could never shake the feeling of being watched. You know that feeling you get?
Yeah, I do. But the only time I ever actually felt that was in Northern California, outside of Paradise, and I went for a walk up in the mountains by myself with a couple dogs. And I didn't know, the thought, of course, Bigfoot ran through my mind. This is way back in the late 80s.
Uh-huh.
And although I never saw a Sasquatch, I did run into a house in the middle of the woods, and some guy with a shotgun who told me if I didn't get off the mountain, he was going to blow my head off. So I was only assuming that he was probably a grower. So.
Well, you figured he wasn't Mr. Rogers, and would you like to be my neighbor?
But saying that, I have to tell you that a few hundred yards into the walk, I did have that feeling, and it was terrain that would have been very easy for a woods person or a Sasquatch. Sasquatch are there, I guess. That's Tim K. Davis sees it, and I'm not going to argue with him about it. A half-breed, and it would be a good area for them to hang out. Now, saying that, I'm sure we'll at some time discuss the matter, see how you see it. But right now, that's not important. Right now is to just talk about your experiences. So let's get back to where your experiences. So I answered the question. Yeah, yes, I've had that feeling of being watched. Yeah, there's, and I'm not talking. It's not the same thing as just your dog. You get a little creeped out, and you're like looking around the corner, but there's really nothing there. This is something.
No, it's like where you got the feeling like someone's stalking you.
Yeah, someone's following you. They know exactly who you are.
Like a stalker who has ill intent towards you or something.
Right. So
but then after I had seen that Bigfoot, I reported it to the sheriff's office because I didn't know what to do, And I asked if anybody had heard any or reported anything, and they said, well, to my knowledge, we don't have any reports at all. But you should probably talk to the guy from the game fishing parks, the game warden or whatever you want to call him. So I talked to him, and he goes, well, they're not a protected species, so my advice to you is if you see one, just shoot it in the face. And I said to the guy, what the hell is wrong with you? I said, why would I want to hurt one? They ain't hurting me or doing anything, or they're not after my livestock or anything.
Well, why did he say that? What did he respond to that question, or was it just
my advice to you is if you see one, just shoot it in the face.
And
I don't know.
So you didn't follow up on it and say, why did you say such a thing? Is there something I should be worried about? Is there something I should be worried about, Sheriff? You know what I mean?
Well, that was the game warden, and I really did.
Excuse me.
Yeah, conservation officer, whatever you want to call him. The guy from Game Fishing Parks. But those guys are idiots.
You find idiots in all walks of life. There's good people, solid people, and then there's the minions that just follow orders.
They felt they needed to reintroduce some of the native species that weren't around. So get this, they're flying around in a helicopter, chucking out pygmy rattlesnakes all over the place.
Huh.
You believe that?
Yeah.
I told them don't fly over my house. If I see a helicopter chucking out poison snakes over my house, I'm going to unload on it.
Knowing, let's see if we could go on a great in-depth conversation about our government and how they view us, and how they pretty much have done horrendous things horrendous things over and over again. And to this day, all you have to do is look up in the sky. Start asking yourself some questions about all those lines in the sky and where they come from. And how come when we were children they weren't there? But that's another story for another day. So let's go back to your important.
And then, then about a week after that, I was near the same area when you buy an old property that's out in the country, you inherit a lot of old junk. Well, I took a burn barrel up there, and I was, like all the plastic and old rotten wood and junk like that. I figured if I at least burn it, I can reduce it and get rid of a fire hazard. So, okay, I'm up there and I'm doing this, and next thing I know, it sounded like on the hill, towards the top of the hill, just off of my property, I hear 6 wood knocks. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I can hear something big moving towards me.
Huh.
And, it was getting where the leaves are just starting to come out in the spring. And whatever it was dark, and I couldn't really see it, so to speak. And it was in behind a clump of about 7 or 8 oak trees. And I'd say it was a little better than 100 feet away and somewhat uphill. And I'm doing my thing, and I had talked with I can't think of the name of them, but it's the group that David Parker is with, or Polides, however you pronounce his last name.
Yeah.
411 guy. Anyway, I talked with a guy from his group.
He's not part of. Was it Four Corners? Four Corners? Is that what it is?
No, it's not Four Corners. It's something else. They're out of California.
I'm to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of them, so I don't follow him. But I think there's too many red flags, too much connection with government, and too much fear-mongering for my taste. So, but anyways, go ahead.
But anyway, I talked with a fellow from his group, and he said, they're not just some wild animal. He said they're more a type of person, just a wild man. And he said, try talking to them. Okay. So I'm out there, and pretty soon I hear, I don't know if it was an acorn or a hickory nut or a pebble or what. Something comes zinging over, probably about, lands probably a good 20 feet away from me. So it was thrown near me, not at me, which is something to make a good distinction on, because if they want to hit you, they'll hit you. And oftentimes they will throw stuff near you, and it seemed to me to be more playful. And I said, you don't have to hide from me. I said, I won't hurt you. You can come out. And it didn't. But, pretty soon I'm still doing my thing. And I figured, well, it's just sitting there. It ain't threatening me or acting hostile. It's just curious. So, okay, fine. And I'm burning stuff. And then I hear something hit on a piece of tin, clang. And I kind of laughed. And I said, no, it's okay. You don't have to hide. And then from along the creek, from the other direction, it sounded like a drunken blind elephant coming down the creek really slow. There was a lot of branches being broken that sounded probably like shovel handle thickness and stuff. And, I thought, well, if it's just one, that's one thing. But now there's 2. And I'm kind of surrounded, one coming in, one from each direction. And I'll admit, it wasn't one of my more braver moments, but I decided, at that point, this would be a good time to get in the truck and drive up to the house and get a cool drink. So I did. Because what was going through my mind is, how when 2 groups of chimpanzees encounter each other, how they'll do a bunch of branch breaking and stuff as a form of intimidation to try and bluff the other group by intimidating them. And I thought, well, if they're trying to intimidate me, I'll just get out of here for right now. So I did that, and then about a week later, I'd let the dogs out about 11:30 at night, and I've got two dogs. He's a coon hound mix, and the other one, he's smaller. I don't know. He's beagle and whatever traveling dog come around. I don't know. I got them both from the pound, so I didn't see either parent. But he's about 40 pounds, and he can't jump the fence. But the other one did. He heard something. He jumped the fence. I thought, it's almost midnight, and okay, so my dog Rascal and I went in the house, and about 20 minutes later, my dog Boomer came up on the front porch and put his feet up, looking in the window. He's ready to come in. I let him in, and he reeked. He smelled terrible. Now, he had a smell to him that reminded me of a sweaty horse, and then there was this sulfury smell like burnt smoke balls, and it had a skunk undertone with it. And, I really didn't feel like giving him a bath at 12:30 at night, but he's the one that likes to sleep in my bed with me, so I didn't see we had much choice in the matter. Now, I gave him a bath, and all the stink was gone, so he wasn't hit by a skunk or a civet cat or anything like that. What I believe had taken place is he heard something, and he jumped the fence and went out, and it was one of the adult Bigfoot males, the ones that hunt. Now, he could have killed my dog pretty easily, but he didn't. Instead, he loved on him, and he petted him, and he showed him affection. And it was at that point that I thought, the Indians learned how to get along with them, so I'm going to try too. So, of course, then you get on the internet, you start searching, and you read everything you can. And I had, filed a couple reports of what had happened and whatnot with some of the Bigfoot groups. Some of them I wasn't real impressed with. And then I got a hold of these guys from the SRA, Sasquatch Research Association. They're from the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And I was impressed with them. And anyway, they sent a couple guys down to investigate. And those guys come down, and they decided they kind of, let's see. The first time, it was just one guy came down, Chris. And this had been a couple months after I had gotten into it, having some encounters and stuff. And he came down, and when he got here, I kind of stopped him and showed him where I had an encounter where I got to see an adult male, and he was pretty huge. Anyway, I'll describe that encounter now. It was probably about 10 o'clock at night, and I heard this kind of tin noise clanging around. Now, my neighbors go to bed really early, so I didn't figure it was from them, and it was kind of along where the property line is. There's kind of a little access road that goes down by the creek. Anyway, he's got a car trailer over there and an old camper, and he had a car over there, and I thought, maybe somebody's over there trying to steal gas out of the car or something. I don't know. So like a good neighbor, I grabbed my spotlight and my 357 Magnum, jumped in the truck, and went to take a look. And as I went down, I didn't see nothing. I got down to the neighbor's house. I backed into the driveway so not to, fill their house full of bright lights. And turned around. As I'm coming back, I shined out in this clearing, and there he was, and he froze. And there was a little bit of dust. So at first I wasn't sure what I was looking at because he wasn't standing upright. He was on all fours. And we're talking, he was every bit as big as a bull. But he was probably pretty close to 8 foot tall on all fours. And, we're talking built like the Hulk. Just huge. I mean, his arms big around his knee. Now, he didn't have a pointy head, the cone head like the Patterson one. He real shaggy. The hair on his head was real like a string mop, and his bangs were cut. And his eyes were glowing bright green, and his skin was gray. Now, in the face, he looked very much like the Patty, but he had more beard because he was a male. And it seemed like the hair kind of went down his back almost like a mane a little bit. And he was pretty thick through the center. Now, I don't know. I'm guessing he was probably a good 1,200 pounds, just guessing. Now, he looked at me, and once I realized what I was looking at, I kind of tipped the spotlight down where I wasn't just shining it in his eyes because I didn't want to piss him off. And at first I was pointing my gun that way, and when I realized what it was, I laid my pistol on the seat because I didn't think it would be enough to stop him if he decided to charge. And I was thinking, God, I hope he doesn't charge. And I tried talking to him, and I said, I won't hurt you. I don't want to hurt your family. Can we get along? Can we live together? And he looked nervous, and he'd look at me, and then he'd look ahead. And then he'd look at me, and then he'd look ahead. Now, when they're on all fours, they can't crane their head back, like how a gorilla does. They're kind of looking a little more down and forward. And he ended up just, with such grace, went through a break in the fence and onto my property. Well, I pulled forward, and where that line was, there had been some trees, and I shined light. I didn't see him anymore. So I don't know if when he crossed that line, there was a dip there. He could have dropped down flat and laid there and been out of sight, or he could have turned left and went into the woods 30 feet and been gone. But when I got back to the house, I pulled the pickup clear up to the porch before I got out. I just drove right up into the yard because, where I'd last seen him wasn't more than about 200 feet away from my front door. So that's how I did that. And, from there, I began to reach out to him. And I thought, I read where the Indians said, don't whistle when you're in the woods because it attracts them. Okay, well, that's what I want to do. And then I kind of figured out that some of them were doing owl calls because you hear way too many owl calls for it to be owls. And they were all different. And so I started whistling kind of like a 4-toot whistle to kind of mimic their call, where it's enough different that I'm not trying to trick them, but yet I can interact with them, and I'll whistle, and they'll do their call back. And I mean, sometimes it sounds like an owl, and then it morphs into sounding like a crow, and then it morphs again into sounding like a bunch of chimpanzees. But I started putting a little food out for them, kind of by where I had been burning up on the north end of my property. And I had a shovel up there, and I yell out into the hollows, "Are you hungry?" And I bang the shovel on the burn barrel a couple times. And they would come and they would get what I put out for them, which was usually a little bit of dog food and a couple strips of bacon and a couple of raw eggs. The reason I use raw eggs in the shell is because if a critter gets what's out there, like a raccoon, a coyote, a possum, skunk, anything, they're going to eat the egg right there, and you're going to find eggshells every time. However, if one of the Bigfoots take it, you never find eggshells. I don't know if they just pop the whole thing in your mouth or if they save it for later or what, but that's kind of how that goes. Now, back to when I had Chris from the SRA come down. He come down, and I kind of showed him some different stuff around and where I'd had encounters and stuff, and then I went to take some food out, and I took it down there and I banged on the burn barrel and got my truck, drove back up to the house, and he goes, "Well, you got a good set of pipes on you." And right after that, we heard a wood knock from the next hill to the north. And then about 3 minutes later, and we heard the shovel hit the burn barrel 3 times. And he just kind of looks at me like, "Are you putting me on or something?" You know, he had that look on his face. But I said, "No, this is how we do it here." And then he stayed and did a bunch of exploring, found a bunch of tree structures and twists and all kinds of stuff. You still there? Hello? Did I lose you?
No, you didn't lose me. I was muted. Sorry, I was just listening, enjoying
Oh, okay.
the story.
Well,
enjoying the story.
it was kind of silent there, and I've got a straight talk Walmart phone, so sometimes it'll drop a call. I wanted to make sure I wasn't just talking to myself.
Sure,
But see,
I hear you.
I used to have this billy goat that I brought from South Dakota. He'd been a bottle baby, so he was more of a pet. And it'd get towards night, and I'd call him and say, "Are you hungry?" And he'd come running, and he'd get fed. And since I was getting watched, they caught on to that. They know what it means. Are you hungry? And they knew that, you know, from watching me with the goat, I'd call him and go, "You hungry?" And he'd come running full bore, and he'd get his evening meal, and, you know, whatever, grain. You know, a lot of times I just feed him horse feed and stuff, but let him graze during the day, and he pretty well just run loose. And anyway, so they caught on to that right away. And then at a later point, I moved the spot where I was putting food out to them along the north edge of my barn, because they have a path that goes right along the north side of my barn that lines up with the face of the dam to my pond. And if you were to go out
sounds
there
like
now,
you have a nice property. Sounds like you have a nice piece of property. It's nice.
Well, in some ways, it's kind of a little overgrown here and there, though, too.
Well, it's definitely be nice for I guess you want us to refer to them as what people? The woods people?
I call them Wookiees. You know. Like,
oh, yes, right. The Wookiees, yes. Our little Wookiees.
Like
big
Star Wars Wookiees.
Well, they certainly, it's, I'm sure that's where Star Wars got the idea from. I mean, it's so self-evident. It doesn't take a genius to figure that one out.
Yeah. Well, everywhere you go, you get a different name for them.
Well, that's okay. You have your own personal one, and that's good. And that's more realistic at the end of the day, I feel, because, you know, at this point, I don't know if we have a proper name as far as the mainstream goes. I don't particularly like Bigfoot. I think it's...
A lot of them call them Sasquatch, and
that's not really true either.
Wherever you go, the name changes worldwide. You go to Australia, they call them Yowies.
Yep.
You know, some places, you know, like here in the state of Missouri, the official name is Momo.
Oh, yes, that's the first one out for me. Momo. Really?
Yeah.
Why is that? That's interesting. You ever think about that?
I think it probably has to do with, there's a place called Monkey Mountain where I believe there had been some sightings, and that's probably why they named it that. Now, that's in a different part of the state, and I really don't have much knowledge of that area, but they do have a place called Monkey Mountain. Well, why would they name it that?
I don't have the answer to that.
So, well, obviously they must have seen something they thought looked like a monkey.
Yeah. Well, you would assume that would be the most probable, but you never know. There could have been something there too, a rock formation that looked like a monkey. You never know. Why do they name
devil
in
the name? There's been sightings.
but that's a very great point, and it's something that I would encourage anybody who listens to this to actually do some research on why they name places the way, why they name them, the names they give them. Because they think there's a lot of places like Devil's Tower, Devil's Mountain, Devil's Valley. Why was that?
Oh yeah.
And I'm not putting
the Cherokee called them devils.
Yeah. Did
and
they?
I found it seems that the Cherokee are about the most forthcoming with their oral history on them. A lot of the other various tribes don't. It's taboo to even talk about them.
Right.
Because their superstition lets them believe that if you talk about them, well, then it will attract them to you. And
well, let me ask you that from your experience. Is that the case?
I don't know. They come around, and once I reached out to them, then I started. It probably took me a year to figure out how many of them there were. Because I figured out that let's
go back to my question here, because it's like, okay, you already knew about them. You have your first experience, and of course afterwards you're like, well, I'll be darned, they're real, and they're not just in the Northwest, and they're in my backyard. What the dickens? And then you start talking about it, and you start talking to them, and more encounters happen. So, is it just circumstance, or is there something to that? I guess what I'm saying is, there's an awful lot of people. I'm going to tell you something honest about who I am, and anybody who follows me and knows, and when we listen to MK or anybody else, I'm one of those exceptions. Although I'm part Cherokee, I have no desire. I have no desire to see them. I think I'd have
no desire to see them.
Well, I think I'd have a heart attack and die if I did. So you know what I'm saying? And I don't feel like dying earlier than I have to. So just put it that way. No, I don't. I really don't. Will things change in time? I imagine they will. If the right circumstance has happened, and I make friends with the right people, and they say, well, hey, just come on over, and pretty much.
Different regions, their behavior is different. It seems like the brown ones seem to be a lot more, the reddish brown ones seem to be a lot more aggressive, and the ones in the deep south, like Texas and Oklahoma, seem to be a lot more aggressive as well. Now here, I don't know. I think the females are kind and sweet, and they love their children, and they're just, nice creatures. They don't hurt me. I've had them come up on the deck where I'm sitting right now before. I found footprints.
David, you might convince me that I just might want to have that happen if it's something like that. And I have the confidence like I do. And I hate to use the analogy of a zoo, but let's face it, when you go to a zoo, they're behind, glass, and bars are becoming more and more the thing of the past as people become a little more sensitive to.
Now, at that time I was living alone, and when I was reaching out to them, I'll tell you, it was kind of spooky at first, and when I began, I used to carry a .357 Magnum with me, and, because you just don't know, just because of the unknown. And I'll be real honest with you, there were several nights where it took quite a few double shots of 100 proof courage to come out and try and interact with them.
I can't even imagine that helping, but okay, if you say so. Maybe a bunch of Vicodin or something. But
well, you do 10 double shots of 100 proof bourbon. That'll help.
I understand.
Loosen you up a little bit so you can man up and go out.
I understand. But believe me, I understand liquid courage. So, yeah, but continue. Yeah.
Now, most of what I do is from my deck, because I took a pretty bad injury, and I shattered my leg pretty bad and ruined my left knee, so I don't get around real good. I've got like a rod, a plate, 8 screws in my leg, and so I'll never run again.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
And
I got multiple sclerosis.
The limp.
Yeah,
but anyhow, along the ridge to the east, a lot of times the females would be out there. And this one night, I was exchanging calls with them, and then I hear footsteps from the ridge of the next hill over come down through the bottom of the gully. The former people that lived here, there was an old car they just shoved down into the bottom of the gully, and the hood's laying next to it. And I don't know, it's like a early 50s Plymouth or something like that, old car. I hear the hood get crinkle as it gets stepped on, and then I can hear the footsteps coming up towards my driveway. And, it's pretty dark because the yard light's out in the front yard, and the house is between that and my driveway. And then I hear the sound of a foot pivot in gravel. And the next thing I know, not 15 feet away from me on the other side of the fence, there stands the young Bigfoot male.
What do he look like?
Now, well, about all I could see was the outline of him, but he was approximately 6 feet tall, at least 3 feet wide, built like a bodybuilder, shaggy hair, and he was standing there not 15 feet away from me. And, well, I'll tell you what, ain't nothing get your blood going like, pumping like that. Now, about all I could hear was the sound of my heartbeat in my ears, and I'm thinking, think fast. What do I do? Now what do I do? There he is. And I thought, okay, I bought a thing of Tootsie Pops at the dollar store I was going to give to him, like where they got a bundle where it's like 10 of them for $1. And it was just right inside the door on the kitchen counter. So I quick grabbed them. And you never seen anybody peeling things so fast. And I'm peeling the wrappers off, and I'm chucking them over the fence towards him. And I heard a couple of them go thud. And he's gathering them up, and then once I threw them all out, I had called the guy who'd been mentoring me. I'll just use his first name, Richard. And I said, Richard, I got a Bigfoot. And he's like 15 feet away from me on the other side of the fence. I said, I threw out a bunch of Tootsie Pops. I go, now what do I do? He goes, well, sit down, see if he comes to you. And I'm thinking, oh, God. And Richard's pretty good. He's an older guy. Now he's almost 80. And, of course, my cheap Walmart phone drops the call. So here, poor old Richard thinks I got. Yeah, I told him to sit down, and now the phone went dead. Oh, no. Well, then I went to call him back, and when I did that, then the little guy went back the way he came from. Now, and I say little guy because when you compare him to an adult males here they run an average of 12 feet tall. So I figure at about 6 foot, I estimated him to be a 5-year-old. So he's just a little kid. He was bigger than me and probably weighed 150 pounds more, but I mean, he's just a little kid. He's 5 years old. And my dogs didn't bark at him. And I figured out why, because he was friends with them. He made friends with them. And there had been times where he'd be out there and the dogs, they'd run over to the corner of the pen and they're standing there with their tails just going, like, well, are you going to pet me? And then you hear a leaf crunch and you shine the spotlight over and there he is. sneaking away. But one time I did that, and I'll tell you what, I gasped because to me he looked like a demon. Because he was, the eye shine, when you hit him with a spotlight, it was so intense. And now the ones here, the only eye shine I've ever seen is bright green like a glow stick, but really intense. And to me, when I hit him with that spotlight, he was on all fours going along, and he stepped on, you know how when you start getting drought situations like oak trees, they'll have clumps of leaves out on the ends of the branches dry up and fall off as a way to deal with drought. We stepped on one of them because he was looking back this way. And I had hit him with the spotlight, and like I said, I gasped because the eye shine was so intense, he looked like a demon. And then when I hit him with the spotlight, he stood up so that the light wasn't so bright in his eyes. But features. I mean, it come out of his eyes like daggers.
Okay.
It just broke? What?
You broke up for just yeah, it's fine. It's like you actually dropped off for like a second, but you came right back. So no worries.
Okay. Well, when I hit him
basically talking about the eye shine and how it
was bright green. It come out his eyes like daggers. Probably, it just seemed to come out like daggers, like probably 4 or 5 inches out of his eyes, and it was that bright green like a glow stick. Only way more intense. And like I said, it obscured his facial features. And, well, like I said, I kind of gasped. It reminds you, like in those vampire movies, when they stake them and the fire shoots out the eyeballs when they're dying.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's the closest thing I can,
I'm not laughing at you. I'm just visualizing the image. So go ahead.
But it was glowing bright green coming out of his eyes like that. And then I, once I realized it, seeing it was him, I motioned with my hand, well, come on back. And, because I'm trying to be friends with them, and I don't do mean stuff to them or show aggression towards them or any of that. I just, we try to get along however well we can. And so I tried to get him to come back, but he wouldn't. And he got over kind of by the road and then crossed the road and was gone into the foliage. But a lot of times I've been out here and I've been calling, and the way my house is on the east side, the garage comes off at basement level, so the roof of the garage is even with my deck. And I got just a small deck. It's, I don't know, it's probably about 10 by 10, and then it's got a set of those concrete stairs with the landing on top and railings that go down and into the yard. And I got a little 2-person booth, like out of a restaurant, and I got that sitting up here, and it's all good. Now, along the deck is probably, 3 feet off the ground, I'm guessing, and then it's got that lattice work along it. But on the one side, a lot of the lattice work is torn out, and I believe that the little one was going under there. Now, exactly what he was doing under there, if he was using it as a place to hide, or if he was, petting the dogs under there or sleeping under there, I don't know. But he'd go under there a lot. Now, he's grown quite a bit. He seems to grow, I don't know. In the past 5 years, he's gone from about 6 foot, and now, after 5 years, he's, I'm going to say, 8.5 feet tall. So I'm estimating he's been growing about 6 inches of height a year, which is kind of neat because not everybody gets to see one from being a young one like that and actually growing. And then through a lot of study and listening and observing the behaviors, I mean, they run that family, it's almost like military in a way as far as discipline and how each family member has their assigned duties and stuff like that. Because like I said, it took me almost a year between listening to calls and everything just to figure out how many of them there were. Because, for example, the adult males that do the hunting, they seem to, at least this time of year, they run a 3-day schedule where they'll be here around with the family for 3 days, and then they're gone for 3 days. And I believe what they're doing is they're trying to maintain their deer herds that they use for food. And they keep running the deer herds in a great big circle and picking up some and adding to it every so often as needed, I'm sure. And it seems like every big male that does the hunting has about a handful of coyotes that are with them. And now one time I seen them running the deer. First there was about 24 deer. They run along the west side of my property. I seen them go across the hillside, and I saw about as many coyotes chasing after them. And then I seen 3 big males running on all fours. And they were herding the deer. And they seem to use the coyotes in many ways. They'll use them to try and intimidate, where they get them howling. You'll hear the big male one will howl, sounds like a werewolf, and then you'll hear the coyotes going off. And then you'll hear that from another spot, and another spot. And I had a friend here once, and he got kind of nervous because we were out at the barn, and there was the hooing going on all over, and then the younger males that are not part of the hunting party, they act as guards over the females and little ones. And we had to walk between 2 of them to get from the house, or from the barn back to the house, and my friend wouldn't shut up because he was nervous. And I'm like, be quiet. And he's going, I've been in the woods all my life, and I ain't never heard nothing like that before. I know I'd be shooting some of that coyotes. And I go, will you be quiet? I said, we got to walk between them 2, and I want to hear them. And I said, all I can hear is your mouth. And he just keeps going. And I know I'd be shooting a bunch of them coyotes. I go, I ain't shooting them coyotes. I said, it's like their dogs. If I kill their dogs, they'll kill mine. I don't think so. And he just keeps going on and on and on. And, I'm like, I go, it's like deer hunting. You need to be silent. And finally I just said, shut up. And that didn't do it. And the last time I told him, I said, if you don't shut the you-know-what up, I said, I'm going to bust you in the head as hard as I possibly can. And that got him to shut up. But we could hear the males with the coyotes. There were 6 of them. And they were all they'd all take a turn howling. And they were spread out about a quarter mile from us in a circle. And it was just like if you cut a pie. How the lines line up? They were all so strategically placed. Now, how do you do that on rough terrain and be that strategically placed, like on a chessboard? I don't know. But they do it. And then it seems like the young males, they act as the guards over the females. Now, these are the ones that people report as being aggressive. And I think a lot of the times what it is they act as guards over the females and the little ones. Now, if you get too close to the females and the little ones, that's when they show themselves and they show the aggression. And they'll run you out of their territory or whatever. They show aggression. And while you're focused on him, That's his job. The females and the little ones are going off to where they feel safe, and you might not even ever know that they were there, but they probably were. And that's why he's showing aggression. Because you're getting too close to mom and the kids. And it's his job to protect the family. And they do. And I'm pretty certain that in most cases, that's why they're acting as aggressive as they do. And it's usually the 8 to 10 foot males that are showing this type of aggression. And it's because they watch over the females and the little ones. And I've only ever been growled at once by him. And that was one night I was going out to leave him a can of, I give him gravy train dog food with a couple strips of bacon and a couple eggs on top. And I have a post that I put it on where I've got some sheet metal around near the top to keep stuff from climbing up it and getting into it that isn't them. And as I was walking by this open bay of my barn, from up by the ceiling, at least 10 feet up, I heard this, and if you ever had one of those oh shit moments, that was it. Because he felt trapped. And that bay of the barn's got one of them sliding doors, that slides on a pipe and it's got wheels along the top. Well, I was in front of his clear exit and he felt trapped. And there again, I'm thinking, I got to think fast. So I turned my back to him. Now, what that did is that removed me as being a threat. He didn't feel trapped anymore. And also, by turning my back to him, it showed him that I trusted him, that he wasn't going to hurt me. And I just kind of went on and pretended like he wasn't there. I put the goodies out on the post right there, and I turned around, and yeah, I might have took a few steps a little faster than I normally would have, just for ways to get clear there. But, it let him know that I wasn't trying to trap him. I didn't mean him any harm. I trusted him. I didn't care he was in the barn. And I just kind of figured, that was my way out.
Interesting.
Very interesting. I can hear them out here making calls. They hear me talking to you, so there's a few of them making a few calls, but that's okay. This time of year, though, a lot of times I try to get some recordings of them, and I'll be honest, I scrap 95% of what I record. And
right.
This time of year,
what do they sound like right now? What are they doing?
Well, there was this. It was kind of like a long drawn out. Almost sounded like the owl call, but kind of
tell Mike says hi, will you?
And anyway, I'll go out and I'll yell out to them, "Where's my girls?" And they'll all pipe up sometimes because you'll hear just one calling, and I'll whistle back, and they'll call back and forth. And I go, "Where's my girls?" And then you hear them pipe up all over. And if I bring them out a snack, sometimes they sound like a bunch of excited chimpanzees almost.
Huh.
Now they do funny things too, like in the fall. Now that's when the big males will split into two groups, and there will always be a presence around, which I believe we're right about to the point of where mating season is going to begin. Now, I'm not sure what their gestation period is, but tomorrow is my birthday. And
well, happy birthday.
A couple years ago, I'll be 51. A couple years ago, I had two of the females sing to me, and it happened to be on my birthday. And it kind of started out with like a cooing, and I've heard that they do like a cooing, like affectionate towards their young, and then it went into, let's see, it almost sounded like some kind of tropical bird love song or something.
Huh.
And if you'd have heard it, you'd have probably had a tear roll down your cheek. I mean, it was beautiful, but it kind of freaked me out, and I thought, oh, geez, now what's going to happen? Is one of these girls going to decide she's in love and snatch me and bring me home? I said, and then I thought, then what happens when the big male shows up? I'm dead. So it kind of freaked me out, and I was kind of worried that, maybe one of them might try and take me. But now it seems like, for the most part, that the females are in charge of the family. There's, I guess you would call her like an alpha female, and she pretty well rules the roost and does what she wants. And I think that that's kind of how it works for them, because you're going to have a large female, and she's going to be in charge of all the other females, all the children, and the young male guards that watch over them. And now, as far as when the big male comes around, is he in charge? Well, probably, but I'm sure he probably defers to her. Now, one thing that I've discovered is that there are 2 males for every female. And why that is, I suspect that they kind of have a high infant mortality rate, and I think the males, being much bigger and hardier, would be more likely to survive until adulthood.
Huh.
That's just my guess.
That's a guess, yeah. Well, David, I want to end this about an hour and a half. And could you maybe share with us your very latest encounter? Or have you already?
Oh, no.
No.
Wow, in May and June, we had quite a few sightings in the yard. From, my friend Ralph, he's my roommate, he saw one of the adult females walk by on all fours right past his bedroom window, and we've seen the young male, and sometimes, I had one on the deck, and my little booth was crooked, and he straightened it out. And then he went over and looked in the window behind where I sit on the computer. Oh, there's one across the road calling. Anyway, the closest encounter I had here recently, I came out and I'm sitting on this little booth on the deck. And I'm sitting here, and I hear the stomach growling. And it's not mine. It's coming from directly below me under the deck. And I thought, so I've got this one that's probably a foot away from me underneath the deck.
What did you do?
Well, I thought he didn't have his chance to get away, so I sat out here, I smoked my cigarette, and then I went in the house so he could escape and not feel pressured.
Okay.
Now, we had last summer, we had some funny stuff happen. Went to the grocery store at night, and we got home, and I was putting groceries away, and my friend Ralph was carrying them in. You live in the country. I mean, we only hit the grocery store about every week and a half, so we usually buy a bunch of stuff. So he's carrying in, and the next day I go to him, I said, Ralph, now you had milk in your shopping cart, didn't you? He goes, yeah, I got it right here on the receipt. I said, okay, where is it? He goes, what do you mean, where is it? I said, well, it's not in the back of the truck. I said, it's not in the refrigerator. It's not in the freezer, and it's not in the cupboard, so where is it? He goes, oh, no. Well, we we did end up finding the milk jug. It was down by the pond. So in between Ralph's trips into the house, the one the young male that I talked about, we call him Little Andy, and he swiped it. Now, 2 days later, Ralph is laying in bed watching TV. And the next thing he knows, he's got a snake in bed with him. Now, we happen to look at the screen, and right next to the edge, there's this round hole, probably about a little bit bigger round than a quarter, at about 8 foot off the ground.
Huh. What kind of snake was it?
And it's called a banded snake. It's like a garter snake, but a steel gray color with a little yellow band behind its head, and then it's got like an orange belly.
Okay.
Now, they're really rare, and that's only the second one I've ever seen. And Ralph let it go outside. But once we've seen the finger hole in the screen, we laughed about it. Well, then the next time we go to the grocery store, this is about 2 weeks later, and get back, I had set out, when I went to this grocery store that I go to, they had a turkey breast, the boneless turkey breast, and I had them deli slice it up, put it in like 3 packages. I put one of them packages out on the counter to thaw. And when we got home, it was gone. And I thought, well, what the heck? Now, my dogs didn't get it, because if they had, it was deli wrapped without freezer paper, you'd have found some paper or something. It wasn't nothing. But we found the paper on the road on the ridge to the east a couple days later. So when we were gone, little Andy, little turd that he is, he's figured out how to open the door now, and he came in the house. At least he didn't wreck the door handle this time. A couple summers ago, he did. He tried to get in, and when I got up in the morning, let the dogs out, I couldn't get the door open. I had to take the doorknob apart in order to get the door to open. So in the meantime, it was a couple days before I got up to the lumber yard to buy a new doorknob to put in there. And one night, Ralph's sitting at the computer, and he heard the kitchen door pop a little. I mean, we just had the hole there where the doorknob goes. And he looks over, and he sees 2 black fingers come through that hole, hook the door, and pull it back shut. So he was up on the deck stealing the kitties' food.
Huh. Very interesting. Very, very, very,
well,
very
I feed my dogs gravy train. I give the cat the same thing. And if that ain't good enough for him, go hunt, And that's also what I give to the Wookiees. So, yeah, he was raiding that. Now, they're awful when it comes to my tomatoes. I remember one year I had 8 cherry tomato plants planted, like in one of them little kids' swimming pools. I mean, they're great for gardening. You just paint them like the color of a flower pot along that outer rim, and put your dirt in them, and you don't have all the weeding and extra stuff. So, and it holds water. And I had like 8 of those tomato plants to do cherry tomatoes, and I had it underneath the yard light too to try and keep them for me. I only got 6 tomatoes out of that the whole season. Well, it's 8 plants. They raided them. And I've got some peach trees, and I don't get any of those, because as soon as they get just about right, they shake the tree and knock them all down, and within a day they're all gone. I've got some wild plums here that they get, the fruit on them gets almost like about the size of a pullet egg, which is pretty big for wild plums. Don't get none of them either. Think I can find a morel mushroom on this property? Nope. They eat all of them too.
Well, listen. I have really been enjoying this, David. I have been. I love the stories, and I'm sure the people who are going to listen to this are going to love it too, and they're going to say, "Mike, just keep going." Well, folks, hold on a second, David. Yeah, I absolutely want to. So, but we have to keep this reasonable length, just simply because of when you create videos and all that kind of stuff. And the longer it gets, the harder it is, and the more you got to compress and stuff. So, anyways, well, I'm
If you
hoping
want to continue this and do more anytime, like I say, you got my phone number.
Oh yeah, David, I absolutely do want to do part 2. And I don't know exactly how the schedule is going to go next week, the next couple of weeks. So I don't want to definitely right now commit to a time, but we're going to definitely, I want to do this. Once I know my schedule with my son, and then, he starts kindergarten, so he starts to publish.
He's just a little one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. And by the way, between the two of us, we're talking. It's over 100 years of age. So I'm talking you and I. So
Yeah.
I'm no spring chicken. So, but anyways, I have. Yeah. So I definitely will call back. I encourage. I hope anybody who listens to this that random. I am looking forward to hearing more about this. And
and another thing that I do for people, and I don't charge any money for it, is people who are having issues with Bigfoot, where they feel intimidated and they've got stuff going on that they don't like. I help them figure it out, what's motivating them to do what they're doing, and how to deal with it so that they can live peacefully with them.
Very
interesting. Help several people this way.
It'd be very interesting. Kat Hansen, I don't know if you know about her. You probably heard her if you've been listening to, broadcasts about Bigfoot. She's been here and there. I've done a couple shows with her, and it'd be interesting down the road maybe have the two of you together with me and have a conversation. And I bet you we could bounce off ideas about just what you just mentioned. So, David,
I had a woman who was having a young male Bigfoot that was about 9 foot tall, who had designs on her daughter.
So this would be a good. This would be a very good place. Hey, David, this would be a very good place to stop when we gather next. This would be right where we'll start off. That would keep nice thing to do. So, David Parker, a gentleman that I hadn't even talked to until a few hours ago. Here we are, bonding and talking Bigfoot. So awesome. So with that, I'm going to end the recording. David, you just stay on.
Yeah.
Old Religion Dystopia, Knowing versus Belief, folks. You can find it on YouTube and on TalkShoe, and everything's free, and you do whatever you want with it. Just be respectful to all the creators and their content and all that kind of stuff. So, all right.